Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled Bridging the Talent Gap, Leveraging Contractors in the Talent Economy for Business Success. My name is Ted Hulsey. I'm your host for today's event. First, let's go through a few housekeeping items. All participants are in listen-only mode. Today's session will be recorded and circulated to all registrants. Thank you for joining in for the live session. Please submit your questions as we go along, and we will address your questions on the fly. We will also have a dedicated Q&A section at the end of the presentation. Finally, we will send you a brief 1-minute survey immediately following today's event. Please share your feedback. Today's webinar is brought to you by a consortium of IT service providers serving your local community. Thank you to our sponsors. ACCI is headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama. Amnet is based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. IT Synergy serves the Phoenix and Denver metro areas, and Sagacent is headquartered in San Jose, California, serving Silicon Valley and the greater San Francisco Bay Area. Now let me introduce our speakers. First up is Yamen Bendit. Yamen is Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Overpass, a talent marketplace that helps businesses find, filter, and hire remote sales and support reps. Yamen will talk about the trends in the talent economy and explore how businesses can leverage remote work strategies to bridge the talent gap. Yamen, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Ted.
Okay, and next up is Trevor Deerdorf. Trevor is the founder and CEO of Amnet, one of our sponsors for this event. Amnet has been serving clients for nearly 25 years. Trevor spends most of his time advising clients on technology and cybersecurity strategy. Today, he will review the key cybersecurity and privacy considerations when you are working with freelancers and contractors. Trevor, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
All right, let me turn things over to Yamen, and you will present from your machine.
All right. You guys can see everything well?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Ted, again, thanks for inviting me to speak here. Really appreciate it. What I wanted to do is introduce myself a bit. So about me, I'm the CPO of Overpass, and like Ted just mentioned, Overpass is a talent marketplace that helps businesses find, hire, and manage their remote sales and support representatives. Now, I've helped businesses of all sizes adapt to remote work processes and technologies for over 10 years now. I've been in the telecom and infotech industry for over 16 years. And, all in all, I've been at the forefront of the remote work boom. And what I wanted to do today is show you some interesting trends and share that with you and discuss that with you. So now, something that I took from the Department of Labor is some interesting trends just in terms of remote work and what we've been going through over the last 3 years, but also the transition over the last 20 years in terms of in-house to transitioning from in-house only to remote work. Now, these are some interesting data points here. So as of May 2022, the unemployment rate has been 3.6%. 68% of companies are hiring in the next 6 months. In March of 2022, there were 11.5 million job openings. 37% of workers are fully remote. 78% of companies use remote contractors. And 4.5 million workers quit their jobs in March 22. So what does that mean for SMBs? One, the Great Resignation that it's been dubbed is still having a major effect on SMBs. The labor market, just in general, is extremely tight, and companies have seen the success of remote work during the COVID era. And more companies nowadays are hiring remote workers and offering more flexibility around where and when people work. Now, hiring remote, right? I wanted to get into a bit about how it started. I think it's important to, before we know where we're going, to know where we came from, right? Traditionally, hiring remote was usually short-term or project-based. It was usually back office jobs like data entry, software development, design, certain IT services, client-facing jobs outside of like large call centers were usually reserved for in-house. Now, back then, what were the options for SMBs specifically, right? So I like to boil it down to three different options. One, you can hire a BPO, right? So that stands for business process outsourcing. And basically what that is that you hire a third-party company to take a part of your business and to run that part of your business. The problem with BPOs has always been the lack of transparency, lack of control, and what that does is it affects the output and the quality of the overall work that's being done. So, take for example, sales and support, right? That's something that often, especially when an SMB starts to scale, they need to scale fast. So they hire their support teams or sales teams through these BPOs. The problem with that is that sales and support traditionally, right? So what are they're client facing, and I always considered your sales team, your support team, they're like your brand evangelists, right? They're the ones that speak to, they're at the forefront of your business. And today's day, especially with reputation and with how quickly things get passed out online, having a bad sales team, saying the wrong things, having the wrong attitude, doing the wrong things, and not having the control that you need and the transparency that you need in order to ensure that they're delivering the message that you want them to deliver can be detrimental to a company. Now, another option was always hiring in-house, right? The thing with hiring in-house, and most of us do that. Our company, we have in-house, we have remote staff, but it's tedious work. Think about the time it takes to sift through resumes, and how much goes into that: screening, scheduling, negotiating, and onboarding, especially in high turnover positions. All this is extremely time consuming and can be very costly. And the last option was always hiring remote, right? Back 20 plus years ago, the mindset started to shift, but there was always a problem with accountability and culture, right? That things weren't as developed as they are today. So it was a problem. But the thing with hiring remote back then was that there was tons of potential. So what we've started to see now is that companies have really shifted from hiring remote workers on a project basis to long-term contracts. And what helped make this happen primarily? The simple answer is technology, right? Over the years, we've accelerated the way we communicate just in general. And I've seen this. I've been at the forefront of this boom that we've had, and it's very interesting to start to really see the growth of this industry. But at the end of the day, what's the problem with sticking to long-term in-house hires only, right? So one, you're limited to in who you can hire. and the type of talent you can attract. And like I mentioned before, too, hiring is time consuming, especially with high turnover positions, and it's frequently more costly. But again, the top reasons that we've seen as a company that companies are hesitant to go remote, and what we try to address is accountability, culture, and fear of the unknown. And with the technology that's available today, a lot of that is accounted for, right? So let's dive into some of that technology. So for example, vertical talent marketplaces, right? These marketplaces, they focus on specific roles. Take, for example, our company, we focus specifically on sales and support staff, right? We have talent from all over the globe. So you're able to easily hire talent on the fly, check out their profiles. It saves you tons of time, and you could hire for the long term. And there are plenty of these types of talent marketplaces in different industries. Upwork is another big one. There's communication technology that we've advanced with so much. I'm sure we all use this stuff, but Slack, Google Meets, the Google Suite just in general, Zoom, all this different technology is there. It's available for companies to help hire and manage your remote team, and to ensure the right type of culture. Project management software, right? That's huge. It's made such a huge difference in terms of organization. So tools like Asana, Monday, Trello, just to name a few. These are all things that you could tap into, and they're not costly, and they really help organize your teams if that's what your team needs. There's also accountability tech, right? And this is something that's very interesting. It includes like time tracking software, right? Benchmarking tools, campaign monitoring, call recording. All these different tools are available to you. And what's important is for you to pick the right tool for your team, right? At Overpass, what we do is we've combined the talent marketplace with the accountability tech, so that you're able to hold your reps accountable, the reps that you hire remote, right? But there's tons of other tools out there that you could use on your own to track their time, ensure that they're doing the work that you've set out for them to do. And then there's always CRM software, right? So that's key, and most businesses have that. Now, what are some key considerations when hiring a remote with a remote staff? So these are some things that I've just seen with all the businesses that we work with, and I'm speaking with on a daily basis. Culture, and I would say even for us, we're constantly working on enhancing our culture, doing virtual events, meetups. Like I mentioned before, our company, we have staff in Romania, we have staff in Israel, we have staff in Mexico, South Africa, we all across the Eastern Seaboard, and we're always, trying to promote as much camaraderie as possible, and ensure that just beyond work, beyond your day-to-day grind, ensure that no one's just left in a silo. These are things that you have to take into consideration, and there are plenty of tools out there for you to be able to ensure that you can facilitate that. Time zones is another thing. It's something that's very important and often overlooked. For us, we have at least a 4-hour overlap with team members in different regions. So, a rule that we have is like, if you're in California, since most of our staff is out in, in Romania or Israel, or, in terms of, I think it's GMT +4, or they're on the Eastern seaboard, we rarely get a team member that's from California, just because that overlap is very, very difficult. If they're willing to work it, then great. But these are things that you have to take into consideration. Another thing is dedicated management. All too often, and I see this time and time again, where people hire, a remote team and they think they can manage themselves, because they're not in the office. Treat your remote staff like they're sitting next to you. You could, have dailies, weeklies. Ensure that you have the processes in place. Ensure that you have the management in place in order to make sure that they're successful, that your remote team is successful. And then another thing is the right software. Choosing the right technology. I think I mentioned that a couple times. That's going to be key, and you have to take into consideration, obviously, your business, but also your team and what's easy for them to work with. And then,
hey, Yamen,
lastly,
can I jump in with a question?
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about training. I mean, and training and enablement, and thinking about, what tools or scripts or all that sort of thing folks might need.
Absolutely. From a training perspective, and that really gets into the dedicated management side of things, right? So training is, for us, we have a training module built into our platform where you can upload onboarding documentation, ensure that that's outlined, so that when you're hiring remote, they know what to do on their first day. They have an outline of what they want to achieve, what you want them to achieve in their first, few weeks there, what you want them to learn. There are some other tools out there that facilitate that, so you can work with documentation tools. We use Confluence internally, for example. That's a big one. Folks use Google Drive, the Google Suite. We also use that, but it's a very good point, Ted. That's critical to the success of your remote staff.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And another item here is that you have to take into consideration is remote work is it's really not for everyone. I would say, it's important to take your time when, and do your due diligence when hiring remotely, right? Ask the right questions during the interview process. Don't skip steps. Ensure that the talent marketplaces that you are using facilitates that, and ensure that you're giving over the right information so that you're on the same page with the candidate. Because again, they're not in front of you. They're not at the office. It's different. Once you shut off that, Google Meets call or that Zoom call, they're off to do their work. So that's why that communication is going to be key up front, and to really vet them, find out, is this person right? Is this person the right candidate for the type of work that we're doing. Now, what I want to do is really open this up to any particular questions that you might have, but just in general, I am available. If you ever want to have a discussion, questions, thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. You could reach out to me at any time.
So what are we at this point? So I want to invite the audience to chime in with questions, and I've also got a couple additional questions as well, and then we'll bring Trevor on stage here in a moment or two. But talk to us a little bit, Yamen, about interviewing. I mean, I think sometimes when people think about hiring contractors or freelancers or remote work, they don't. I don't think most people think that I don't think most people expect to do the same level of rigor with interviewing a candidate or interviewing a candidate for a freelance or contracting role as they do a normal employee. And talk to us about what should be done there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Things to take into consideration when interviewing, and one thing that's often overlooked is their internet connection, right? So for us, on Overpass, with the contractors that we have, for example, that you could tap into, we try to account for that as much as possible, but things change depending on where they're located, what part of the world they are, so internet, is something that's very crucial, because that's the way they're going to communicate with your customers, especially if they're doing that type of work. That's one aspect to take into consideration, but there's so many other aspects, when taking into consideration, like their availability. Make sure that is key. Make sure that I'm speaking from personal experience, but here, on Overpass, we have these voice samples where you can, view a profile, listen to what they sound like just before you even talk to them, right? But sometimes that doesn't translate into how they work conversationally, so feel them out as much as possible during the interview process. That's something that I highly recommend from that perspective.
Yeah, and I would jump in with another comment too. I mean, in my business, I leverage Overpass, I use Upwork, I use Fiverr. So I'm using all of these services, and I mean, I think the other thing to take into consideration is, freelancers over time, they will build up their own reputation profile, just like an employee that you would hire. The other things you want to check on, do they have a LinkedIn profile? I mean, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But I think as the global marketplace just moves ahead, even somebody on the other side of the world who may live somewhere where LinkedIn is not maybe so current, they know that the companies they're working with, do value somebody being transparent and having a professional profile. And a lot of these platforms also have kind of built-in reputation and kind of client feedback and reputation things, which is, again, something else you can double check. So you want to, double check, do they have a good internet connection? You want to interview them. You want to make sure they understand how to use the tools. You want to make sure they're highly reliable. They do what they say they're going to do, but also look at those other softer things where you can kind of analyze how somebody's managing their own reputation as a contributor to the process and contributor to the work.
Yeah. And, just to add to that, you'll find that on our platform, on Upwork, they have ratings, they have feedback. Go through that. Question them on the feedback that's left by previous clients, right? Just like you would do an in-house person. When, you know, when we hire, you know, one of the things we ask is, why'd you leave your last job, right? What happened there? Get into it.
Yep. Talk to us a little bit about mistakes that that companies make in terms of management. I mean, you said, hey, don't forget management, but unpack that a little bit for us. Like, what are some of the mistakes you see companies make when they enable remote work and they have freelancers? What do they forget to do? I mean, what are the things they traditionally would do in office or with team that's on the payroll that they don't do when they maybe engage with remote workers?
That's a good question. One of the key things that we see is most managers focus on output and they don't focus on outcomes, right? And output is important. You know, how many calls you make, what you do, all of that stuff. But because of the nature of the type of work of the relationship, right? I often see managers not integrating the remote talent, you know, that remote employee into their company the way they would, say, someone that's in-house. So they don't fully understand the customer problems. They don't fully understand what's going on. And then it just gets into output, like how many calls you make, what'd you do, what, you know, and ultimately they're not succeeding in driving and making real impact for the business, right? In whatever the position is.
That's right. And I think the sometimes I think one of the challenges that remote workers may have is they may not understand, you know, the importance of brand or importance of customer experience, or they may not have visibility to like the whole value chain. And so they may not realize how vital their contribution. I mean, there's this whole thing of like, you know, these studies over time where if somebody in a factory kind of like sees their finished product and then they see how their part of the work contributes to an outstanding outcome, or like the car coming off the assembly line, then they understand and lean into their work and contribute to their work in a more meaningful way if they understand the outcome. And I think remote work, the danger is that people will be like just shoehorned into like a little small part of the process, but not see the overall process. So that's, I think, a big opportunity for you to kind of educate them on how their work contributes to other colleagues or the finished product or the customer experience.
Right. Yeah.
Let's talk about accountability. You know, let's talk about some brass tacks. I mean, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how Overpass does it, but let me just, I think let me just share some of my experiences on Fiverr and Upwork just as an example. I mean, every one of these platforms wisely, I think, gives the organization that's hiring in freelancers or contractors tools to basically be able to really scrutinize the work. And part of it's managing output, you know, so you want to see like, okay, where did you, you know, track your time, you know, document the progress on the project, you know, use the tools as a way to like, you know, if it's like in marketing and communications, a really important thing to do is to be able to, you know, manage your feedback processes inside the tool. So these platforms are great because they really make it a lot simpler to manage that. But talk to us a little bit about how Overpass in the sales and support arena, how you're able, as a company hiring talent, how can you drive accountability?
Totally. So what we've done and what we've created, you know, is not only, like I mentioned earlier, not only a talent marketplace, but a place for accountability. And how we do that, what we've added engagement tools and engagement software to the talent marketplace as well. So you have full insight into, you know, the calls they're making, the emails they're sending out or taking, and you could see what's going on. We have a full campaign monitor that kind of breaks down based on what the outcomes of conversations are, so you could see their performance. We have a full time tracking system, so you can see when they're logged in, what they're doing, how long did they spend on this phone call, how long did they spend reviewing this this lead, for example, in sales, how long did they spend wrapping up. So you can kind of really get into the weeds of their day to day. That's a lot of what we do, here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
With that, so Yamen, hold the line. We'll have a
Sure.
we'll have more time for formal Q&A. Everybody, you could reach out to Yamen and find him on LinkedIn or email him here if you have questions as follow-up. What I'd like to do is, I think a good segue from accountability, a good segue from there is to talk about security and privacy, because another big thing to think about is is how are you securing data. So Trevor, do you have control there? And can we remind you to turn on your camera, please?
I'm on now. Do you see me?
Yes, we see you. And your slides, make sure we toggle them into present mode.
Okay, you're gonna have to help me with that, Ted.
Okay. Well, it's just showing your notes. It doesn't look like you're in present mode.
Oh, you know what? It's sharing the wrong screen. Stand by. Stop showing, and now try that again. That's fun. How about that?
Yes. Bingo. All right.
All right.
Present mode. So you got the floor, Trevor. Talks through security and privacy and data governance.
All right. Well, so you can have all the best securities in place internally and still have a failure to protect things from the outside. And I'm going to cover some of what the risks are and what are some things that you can do to better protect yourself. Cybersecurity is just like anything. Nothing's ever 100%, but what we can do is make it harder and less likely that you're going to have a challenge. So we'll start with once upon a time. Some of the people on this video are probably old enough to remember when flying was actually fun. Rather than kick grandma out at the curb at the airport, you could park your car and accompany her to the gate and wait till she boarded the plane. But then the world changed forever. And our new reality is that we've got more security than ever, and security is inconvenient. But it's our new normal, and it applies to your company cybersecurity too. Unfortunately, some companies think they have solid cybersecurity, but it's actually about as effective as this gate. So make sure you're working with professionals and experts who really know their stuff and can make sure that you're not putting up barriers like this flimsy little gate solution here. So our goal with protecting your data, whether that's with subcontractors or internally, is one, confidentiality. That's really only sharing what the right people need to know and have access to, that the information is usable, complete, and the latest version, and there when you need it. So the risks. The risk of outsourcing your projects, your data, letting someone into your business to help you do the things that aren't your area of expertise. Some of the things that we find that people do that are really problematic is one, they're going to give too many permissions. Their permission level internally or externally, should never be higher than absolutely necessary. Now, you may end up with a third party who is intentionally a bad actor, and they're putting something out there where they want to get in and get at your stuff. And you need to be leery and cautious. And we'll get into trust but verify here in a moment. Or you could even have an accidental attack. Your contractor, with no ill intent, could have an infected system or a problem that when they share a file with you, passes it on to you, and can be crippling in some way for you and your business. So as far as managing the risks, one of the important things to do is avoid file sharing via an untrusted source. Fortunately, Fiverr, Upwork, Freelancer, and others have the ability to have this interaction within their platform. If it got out that, hey, I worked with somebody on Fiverr and they gave me malware that encrypted my company's servers, that'd be a PR nightmare. So they have done some good things on their side to be more secure and to protect that kind of a scenario from happening. Again, nothing's 100%, so still need to be diligent on your own. So don't communicate with that contractor outside of that platform whenever that's an option. So if you must allow a vendor access to your systems, start with zero trust. And this is an industry term that any sysadmin or cybersecurity expert is aware of. These should already be part of your cybersecurity controls for anybody accessing data, whether they're internal or external. Trust but verify. Verify that your third party has implemented strong cybersecurity monitoring and plans. On a big scale, we all heard about the fact that Target got compromised by their HVAC contractor, right? Not intentionally, but somebody figured out they could leverage the access that that HVAC contractor had and steal all kinds of customer data from Target. It's not just big guys being hit. It's everybody, and you need to be diligent on that. So you should request for them to explain what their protocols are and make sure that they actually do have an incident detection and response plan. And set cybersecurity risk expectations with your vendor. If there's a breach, that there's a clear expectation that they perform an audit, and if they're not willing to do that, if they're not willing to cooperate in an area like that, you may not be working with somebody that is maybe mature enough, sophisticated enough as a business to be doing business with. So proceed with caution. So what can you do on your side to protect your systems? First of all, make sure that your computer is updated, your software is updated. Security patches come out all the time, whether that's for Windows or QuickBooks or even the Adobe Creative Suite. So make sure that those things are current. You're less likely to end up with a problem coming in through one of those tools. Also, 10 years ago, for most of us, it was enough to have a good firewall and some antivirus. Now there's so much more that you need to be able to protect your company, protect your data, and at a minimum, I would say you need to have endpoint detect and response solutions and multi-factor authentication. Many of you probably are using something like that with Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Duo. I don't have a big preference, just use one of them. And then backup. Always back up your stuff. This always applies to IT, but if you're going to protect your data and you could end up with something malicious going on, have a backup. And Dropbox and Google Drive are not backup solutions. You want to have something that's encrypted, stored locally, also in the cloud. And what you've got locally needs to be segmented, isolated from your network. And again, using multi-factor authentication will help with that. So as far as keeping you safe, my colleagues on this call today and Amnet, we leverage dozens of tools to be able to provide these types of solutions to protect you and your business internally, externally, and from your third-party folks. That's what I have today, Ted.
So Trevor, I'd like to pop a couple questions over to you, and again invite the audience to chime in with additional questions. But I mean, I think talk to us a little bit about the insider risks. I mean, let's start with the principle that like employees can be like a source of cybersecurity risks for organizations, and of course extend that logic to if you hire freelancers and contractors, how they can also be a risk.
Sure, Ted. Actually, if I had had more time, this presentation includes the fact that let's see, about 28% of breaches that are going to happen within your business are actually going to involve internal actors, and so 1 out of 4, that's pretty high. So if you're only protecting your business from the outside, you're missing 25% of where your threats are going to come from. So when you're letting that subcontractor inside of your network, inside your business, yeah, that can be a threat, and you just want to make sure that they're willing to follow basic information controls.
That's right, and I think you talked about the concept of zero trust, which is basically start from a point of zero really, and then only selectively give people access to data and tools that are strictly necessary for their job. I mean, another industry term is kind of the principle of least privilege, which is the basic concept. You only give people access to things that they strictly need to get the job done. And that applies internally to employees based upon role or level, and it applies to contractors as well. I think you mentioned, Trevor, MFA, multi-factor authentication, and I guess I would just throw out there that it's just as easy to implement MFA for access to different software tools and systems for an employee as it is with a contractor. And anyway, MFA is like literally one of the lowest pieces of low-hanging fruit in terms of like the benefits to security, because it solves so many problems with password theft and password reuse.
And the cost is low too. It's one of the least expensive things you can do. One of the things we insist our clients all do is not only multi-factor authentication, but cybersecurity awareness training for their team.
That's right, and I think that cybersecurity, I think maybe that's another one. I mean, there's really no reason not to have your freelancers, and contractors go through the same cybersecurity training, because, I mean, Yamen, to your point earlier about culture, if, part of your culture should be building a culture of security and a culture of responsibility for employees or contractors, with how you use your technology, how you use your software systems. And some of that just comes down to good old-fashioned formal training. And there's you should use those same tools, for contractors and freelancers as well.
Yep.
Trevor, talk to us about maybe virtual desktop technology. Is that something that you recommend? Is that a potential option for folks?
Oh, sure.
You may be a fan or not?
Boy, that's really letting somebody internally. I'm a fan of it. Externally, letting somebody in on one of your servers where you really don't have your arms around that endpoint, I'm not a fan. I'd rather have something that's out in the cloud, that's more secured. If you're working in an environment like Upwork or Fiverr, I think you're going to be better off than. And with Zoom and Teams and everything else right now, we can do screen sharing with somebody, for instance, and not have it be a security threat. So I would prefer doing that than having a contractor use remote desktop.
Right, and I guess the other thing that folks need to think about is, file sharing platforms today. Just remember that the thing that's your friend the most in these platforms is you can be very fine-grained in terms of what you actually give a freelancer or a contractor access to. So if you're using Microsoft Teams, for example, you can really lock down the permissions and use the file collaboration and chatting capabilities, real-time chat capabilities in Teams, and use it with individuals who are outside of your actual organization. And you can segment and control that they're only able to work on and action on the content that gets shared in that very narrow Teams environment. So that's a great example of using the collaboration tools for multiple different interactions, chat, files, you know, and meetings in a fine-grained sort of way. And then the other file sharing collaboration tools like Dropbox or Google Drive or Box, for example, those tools also give you the ability to just shave off the narrow set of content that the contractor needs to work on and to put it in a collaboration space that's online in the cloud that you can control, and it just naturally segments them and executes that principle of least privilege on a routine basis. So Yamen, any comments on, you know, just this overall topic of data privacy and security and what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that came to mind as Trevor was talking, and then the topic that you guys were just discussing now, is one thing that I would say, and one thing that we do is we treat new contractors like we treat new employees, and I love, you know, that start from zero. You know, depending on who we're hiring and what we're hiring for, you know, when it comes to culture, you want to ensure that everyone feels a part of the company, and even contractors, because you want to get the best out of them, right? So you want to, from my perspective, you want to create a standard across anyone using your tools so that you can, you know, build that trust over time and then give them the access that they need over time as they, you know, mature within your company. So that's and I've seen this across a lot of companies that work off of Overpass, where you know, they'll start, you know, giving them access to certain things. You know, not every company that comes to Overpass uses our CRM, for example. Some use their own CRM, so they just come for the talent, for example. So they'll give certain permissions to those remote contractors that they're hiring. And then I've seen promotions just over time, and then they get more access and more access. So you know, treat it. My recommendation here is like treat it the same. You know.
That's right. And you can, I mean, the natural thing is as you build trust. I mean, I think we're in an operating environment where people almost need to, I mean, over time earn trust. You know, earn additional trust points, if you will. And as you go, as they deepen their work, as they deepen their experience and their responsibilities grow, then you can open up things to in a more broad basis. But again, even then, like I think the example of CRM tools, you know, both Salesforce or HubSpot are two platforms I'm in and out of every day, multiple times a day. As an administrator, you have really fine-grained controls over what a rep, for instance, a sales rep who's using a CRM tool, what they can and cannot do. And you just need to be super familiar with the administrative controls and make sure you implement them correctly so that people can't export mass amounts of data or, you know, all those sorts of things. So leverage the tools.
One thing I would add here is, and something that we use, because all of our sales representatives are remote, we use our own product, right? We leverage something called LastPass, Password Keeper. We're very strict on that. It's because passwords are shared internal systems, and there's so many different things you can do with that, you know, where they can view the password, not view the password, get access to certain things. So
yeah, I mean, I think on every single webinar we host every quarter, we probably mention MFA and LastPass in every single session. So I'm glad you brought it up. But I mean, the key with employees or contractors is if you're going to insist upon unique passwords for every system that are complex, then of course, a human being needs a password locker solution to be able to deal with that complexity. And it's another key piece of the puzzle to keep your systems secure so that people aren't reusing credentials and potentially a victim of a credential theft that could lead to a breach of a very serious system. So, okay, well, with that, let me make a few concluding remarks for our audience. All of our sponsors welcome any prospective clients. If you're concerned at all about maybe where your organization is in terms of your cybersecurity journey and your maturity, embrace the concept of a rapid security assessment. Security assessments are a great way to first understand where you stand as an organization with your cybersecurity and get to know a potential provider. So all of the managed service providers that sponsored today's webinar do rapid security assessments as a first step in getting to know you as a potential client. And it's a great way for you to get a health checkup, really, if there's any glaring cybersecurity issues in your current environment. Sometimes people go through a security assessment, it's a clean bill of health, and maybe there's some medium-term things where you want to raise the bar. Other times, our MSP sponsors will find glaring holes, either in people's Windows Server configurations or unpatched systems, or certain networking configurations that are just glaring problems. So a rapid security assessment is something that can be done with a little bit of time and a little bit of money, and is a great best practice to engage with managed service providers. So if you are looking at potentially exploring having an IT service provider work with your organization, if you've heard something on today's webinar where like, hey, we need to think about that, we need outside experts to help us understand how to secure our team of contractors, or it's better secure when we add new employees, talk to one of our MSP sponsors and consider this special we're offering on the rapid security assessment so if you enjoyed this webinar, mention it, and we will offer the rapid security assessment at a special one-time offer. But with that, we've exhausted all the questions, and I want to thank all of our sponsors for today's webinar: ACCI from Birmingham, Amnet from Colorado Springs, IT Synergy from Phoenix, and Sagacent from San Jose, California. Thank you to our sponsors, and I want to thank Yamen Bendit and Trevor Deerdorf for sharing insights today on how to bridge the talent gap and to do it securely. So, gentlemen, thank you guys very much for an informative conversation, and we look forward to seeing everybody on a future quarterly webinar. Take care.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.